They say every neighborhood has that one person who takes the HOA rules more seriously than life itself. In our neighborhood, that person wasn't elected, wasn't appointed. He simply crowned himself the enforcer. His name was Curtis Blake. Clipboard always under his arm, phone camera at the ready, he patrolled sidewalks like a self-declared sheriff. But Curtis made a mistake. He picked a fight with my grandfather, Henry Cole. And if you know anything about Henry, you'd know that was the last porch a man should ever step on. It started one early morning. The sky was still dark when I heard the creak of our backyard gate. Grandpa, sitting in his rocking chair with his mug of black coffee, didn't even flinch. He just muttered, "There goes that clown again." Sure enough, Curtis was scaling our fence like a thief, snapping photos of Grandpa's rose bushes. His claim: they violated community symmetry standards. Imagine that. A 76-year-old veteran growing roses was apparently a crime against suburbia. I wanted to storm out there and confront him, but Grandpa simply raised his hand. "Patience, son. Let a fool dance long enough, and he'll write his own curtain call." But this wasn't Curtis's first trespass. Weeks earlier, he had rattled the lock on our shed. Another time, he leaned a ladder against our garage wall, claiming to be checking gutter violations. Each time, Grandpa reported him to the HOA president, Marjorie Kent, and each time, Marjorie brushed it off with that fake smile of hers. "Oh, Curtis just cares too much. He's passionate about the neighborhood." Passionate? The man was breaking trespassing laws before sunrise. Grandpa even called the sheriff's office. But they said unless Curtis was caught in the act and charges pressed immediately, it would be our word against his. That's when Grandpa got quiet. And when Grandpa goes quiet, it only means one thing. He's planning. For 4 straight days, the garage was off limits. Tools, wires, and metal scraps cluttered the bench as Grandpa worked from dawn till dusk, humming old country tunes under his breath. By the 5th day, his invention was finished. Our plain iron gate had been transformed into a low-voltage electrified deterrent system. Legal, permitted, certified, and marked with a bold yellow sign, warning, "Electrified gate. Trespassers will be shocked." Grandpa didn't hide it. He wanted Curtis to see it, and sure enough, Curtis came creeping back at dawn. He scaled the fence, muttering about violations. The moment his hand gripped the latch, snap! A jolt shot through him. He yelped, stumbled backward, and crashed into the mud. Limping away, he looked less like an HOA sheriff and more like a man who'd just lost a bar fight with a toaster. Grandpa didn't move an inch. He just sipped his coffee and whispered, "Justice makes the sweetest morning soundtrack." By lunchtime, the entire neighborhood had heard the story. Curtis Blake, the self-appointed HOA cop, had been shocked off his high horse. But Curtis wasn't done. By noon, Marjorie Kent had called an emergency HOA meeting. I went with Grandpa, and the room felt like a circus. Marjorie sat at the head of the table, pearls around her neck, plastered smile that could fool no one. Curtis sat at her right, his arm wrapped in a sling like he'd survived a battlefield. "This man," Curtis barked, pointing dramatically at Grandpa, "has turned his property into a death trap. That electrified gate nearly killed me." Grandpa stayed calm. He slid a folded permit across the table. "State code compliant warning." Sign posted. "Everything legal?" Marjorie frowned. "Well, legal or not, Henry, it's aggressive. It's not in the spirit of community living." Grandpa leaned forward, his gravelly voice cutting through the room. "Community living? Trespassing at 5 in the morning isn't community living, Marjorie. It's harassment. And next time, I'll press charges." The room shifted. Neighbors, who had been silent, started speaking up. One admitted Curtis had marched into her yard to measure her hedges. Another revealed he'd photographed her children's bikes and called them clutter. The tide was turning. Curtis's face turned crimson as the truth spilled out. But humiliation didn't stop him. For 2 days straight, his dented truck, circled the block, headlights lingering outside our driveway like a vulture. On the third night, just past midnight, I heard the sound of clanking metal. Looking out, I saw Curtis crouched at our gate, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in. The other, Grandpa was already waiting on the porch, remote in hand, coffee steaming in his cup. "Watch closely, boy," he said. The moment Curtis clamped the cutters onto the steel, Grandpa pressed the button. Zap! Curtis convulsed, dropped the cutters, and rolled into the mud, screaming. Grandpa lifted his phone, recording every second. Calm as ever, he muttered. "Repeat offender. Case closed." But Curtis wasn't finished embarrassing himself. Drenched and trembling, he pulled out his phone and dialed 911, shrieking, "Attempted murder! This psycho tried to electrocute me!" 5 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights bathed our yard. Officers stepped out, hands on their holsters, looking from Curtis, muddy, frantic, rambling, to Grandpa, who looked like he'd just been interrupted during a chess match. "Sir," one officer asked, "is there an active electrical system on that gate?" "Yes," Grandpa said evenly. "Permitted. Documented. Warning signs posted and—" He handed over his phone. All. Caught on video." The officers watched as Curtis climbed, cut, and fried himself on camera. One looked up and asked flatly, "So you trespassed?" Curtis stammered. "No, I was conducting an inspection for the HOA." "At midnight?" the officer shot back. "With bolt cutters?" Curtis froze. The law couldn't have been clearer. Trespassing, vandalism, attempted theft, and filing a false police report. The officers cuffed him right there in front of the gate. Neighbors, drawn by the sirens, filled the sidewalks. And this time, they weren't whispering. They were clapping. Curtis shouted about conspiracies, about Grandpa being a danger to the community. But no one listened. His reign as self-appointed sheriff was over. As the cruiser door slammed shut, Grandpa leaned back in his chair, tilted his hat, and said, "Sometimes, son, all justice needs is a little electricity." Curtis Blake's reputation was fried, his imaginary badge stripped away. And the gate he thought he could conquer? It didn't just shock him. It shocked the whole neighborhood awake. Because when you mess with a man like Henry Cole, you don't just lose the fight, you lose the crown you never earned.